Hello, I'm Pierre Leichner, and I'm very fortunate to be living beside this beautiful river, the Capilano River in North Vancouver. This is the land of the unceded, stolen land of the Squamish Nation. The indigenous people who lived here for thousands of years before the settlers came and invaded this country developed a deeper understanding and respectful connection with the land and the animals that live in it and on it. And I think we have lost that connection. We belong to the earth. The earth does not belong to us. When we pollute it, we harm it, and we harm ourselves. My story begins about 10 years ago when I was listening to a video, documentary on school children in France who were learning in school to grow their food and to cook it. During this documentary, I also learned that all the agrochemicals that farmers and gardeners use to grow bigger and healthier fruits and vegetables eventually wash down in the earth, and they harm the earthworms. So you may say, so what? Well, even Aristotle had written about their importance when he said, the earthworms are the intestines of the earth. They digest the dead leaves, dead animals and so on, and they produce the food that our plants need to grow on. Not only that, but they also create tunnels and they break up the earth so that it is easier for those roots to grow. So when the earthworm population decreases, well, what do you think happens? The earth becomes less fertile. And farmers, gardeners, to compensate for them, have to buy more chemicals and break up the earth and so on to have the plants grow. Ultimately, those chemicals also go into the water, and we are harmed by them. I'm an environmental artist with a socially engaged practice. So, how was I going to bring this issue into an art project that would be accessible to people, the general public of all ages? And this is the project that I'm going to talk to you about and more specific. But before we go there, let's cover some of the concepts, some of the art concepts that are associated with it. Art project depends on concepts from the environmental art, BioArt, and community engaged art. Let's first look at land art to environmental art from the 60s to present. The work is not put in a place, it is a place, is a quote from Michael Heiser, a well-known land artist. Let's take a quick look at a group of New Guinea artists collective. They gather nuts and found objects in the forest and they put them together in arrangements as well as twigs, stones, moss that they find and glean in the forest. But who are these artists? Well, they are bowerbirds. In fact, it is mostly the male that gathers these materials and puts them together to attract females. This is interesting, I think, in terms of the fact that we often think that humans are the only artistic species, but perhaps indeed animals have an artistic sense. I'm not sure how the female makes a choice. It may have some artistic aesthetics to it. This work very much reminds me of the work of bowerbirds that we find in the forest with twigs and stones. But, of course, it is a work of Andy Goldsworthy, a very well-known land artist. Another consideration is that this work is not new. Our ancestors, as far as 700 BCE and 200 BCE, were drawing these large-scale lines on the ground, in the earth, and on sides of hills. What are some of the land art shared characteristics since the 60s? It's become a vague term, includes process art, environmental art, ecological art, earthworks, installation, and so on. It forces a look at nature. It's made of materials from the earth. The work itself is inextricable from the site. It's a look for new forms. It requires a physical commitment for the artist. It cannot be sold. Art is life. Art is nature. It does not symbolize it. Here's a couple examples from very well-known land art works. They're monumental. The Spiral Jetty by Robert Sminton in the Great Salt Lake, Nancy Holt Tunnels, and the Double Negative by Michael Heiser. Since the 90s, environmental art is more of an expanded cross-disciplinary field. An artist is a geographer, social worker, anthropologist, activist, or architect. It has a stronger social, political, ecological agenda, a way to reconnect with the public. It's much more local versus global, and economical in scale and time. It can be also more subversive, ironic, collaborative, and less romantic in its situation. Some artists found recycling materials or garbage that washes up on the shores to make these large-scale installations to draw attention to this problem. They also use garbage that is found in the cities to make these light installations, as well as using plastic bottles and so on found on the beaches. There is still work that focuses on reconnecting with the environment through beauty. And there are special gardens around the world in many countries that just are dedicated to environmental art. A brief word about BioArt. This is an image of Alba, a very famous rabbit, who was made to be fluorescent under UV light by manipulation of her genes with a jellyfish gene that fluoresces in the dark. So BioArt is also known as vivo art, transgenic art, wet art, biotech art. Bio means life. Bio is the fusion of science, art, and life. It is a new current of contemporary art. It is an artistic procedure. Instead of finding to represent life through paint, marble, pixels, the artist uses itself bacteria, cell lines, plants, insects, even animals. The work can feel genuinely subversive, even dangerous. An example is this cell culture type of experiment where the artists are growing cell lines to look like objects, in this case a little jacket made out of tissue culture. This is another example, a more ironic one if you want, by Wim Delvoye, a Belgian artist who has made a series of poo machines, a mixture of plumbing and gastroenterology. A well-known chef may have put some food at one end that he cooked, and at the other comes out poo. And this poo is packaged and it is actually sold. And in fact, in this case, the buyer indeed knows that they are getting shit from an artist. I personally work with plants and roots, making installations in gardens. I work in vegetable gardens where I trap vegetables into plastic containers I find in recycling bins, and they grow to those shapes or sometimes break out of the shape. In that case, I have an alter ego called Dr. Legumes on YouTube, has got his channel, and Dr. Legumes does radical surgery as a plastic surgeon for vegetables to free these vegetables and their fruits from their entrapments in the plastic. Let's look briefly then at socially or community engaged art, drawing on the concept from Pablo Helguera. Community engaged art really means, in essence, a shift in role from the directive role of the artist to a much more participatory and making role of the participant. One end of this scale we have nominal participation, on the other one we have collaborative participation, where the work is really done together with the artists, both from the structure and the content. A lot of work is done in the middle in terms of creative participation, where the artist just provides a structure and the participant fills it. Socially engaged art is dependent on social interactions, emphasis on process rather than the final product, interdisciplinary, experimental, creates an empowered and rich community, is collaborative, and also tends to a wide audience. Here you have community participants that are making ephemeral installations along pathways in parks with material that actually is provided by the artist for them to use. Another example here, structure made by an artist, and children and adults on the beach gather material to fill it and get the message across. Let's now talk a little more specifically about my worm art project. Hi, and here I am beside my little compost bucket, and let's meet some of my collaborative artist friends. It is very easy to find them, but there are many that live here. And they're all very keen and ready to come and make some beautiful art as I wish. As you can see, they look nice and plump and happy. And after they've done all the digesting from the kitchen scraps, I then put the compost in the garden, and they continue the cycle of being artists and as well as good for the ground. Here we are in the painting studio. On the table you see some food dyes, non-toxic, that I prepared, diluted with some water, particularly blue and green that we'll start with. And on the floor is the painting we're going to work on today. It is a biohazard sign or symbol that I have painted in black acrylic paint mixed with insecticidal soap. So the next step is to get our worm artist ready to do some painting. And here we are, ready to start with some of our worm artists painted in some blue, or rather some blue food dye. So from now on we will speed up the camera so that you can, this will of course take a number of minutes, and also further colors will be applied as these colors dry out. Then another color will be applied until we agree together with them that the composition is finished. You may already start to see how when they approach the insecticide and the paint, they immediately withdraw. Yeah, of course, part of the reason is they do not like light, so they will shy away from the light as fast as they can. You can see their reaction to the chemical is fairly rapid, and I'm always careful that they don't stay there too long. And here they are, after a long day's work, ready to go back home to the compost pile. I began this project in 2021 by painting essentially abstract shapes with the worms. And then I want to move to paint symbols that contain the paint, the insecticides and the agrochemicals, symbols that were relevant to the project. In early 21, I also met the poet Alyssa Armsweeb, who wrote a wonderful poem called Sink on our disconnection with our earth. She uses footprints as a metaphor for this. I then went on to paint monetary symbols and also fruits and vegetables in another series. The community engaged aspect of this work began in 2022 when I was teaching a master's class on this issue and asked the students to make these paintings. They chose the symbols that they were going to use as well as the colors, and this is a series that they created. The next year I again repeated this project, but this time with community participants of all ages, including children. And these are some of the paintings that painted using symbols that were relevant, pertinent to their environment. To conclude, I hope that this visual art project has helped you see how it is possible to conduct an ethical art project with animals, to help a general public gain a better understanding of a real issue that is affecting our environment, in the hope that we can then develop a more sustainable, respectful relationship with the land, plants, animals that we are fortunate to share this planet with.